In 2003, Metallica would release their much maligned album Saint Anger. The band had gone through a tumultuous time during the making of the record, with frontman James Hetfield leaving the group to attend rehab to deal with substance abuse issues. A lot of turmoil was captured on the 2004 documentary Some Kind of Monster. A year after the album was released, the band found themselves on tour in Europe, and it was during the summer that they were playing their own shows and headlining a variety of festivals across the continent. At one gig in the UK, drummer Lars Ulrich was a no-show, leaving the band in a difficult position. Do they cancel the gig or get someone else to fill in? That's what we're going to discuss in today's video. On June 6, 2004, Metallica was set to headline the Download Festival, the UK's biggest metal festival. The band had previously played Lisbon, Portugal, and were on their way to the UK when MTV would report that the band's drummer Lars Ulrich was feeling under the weather without disclosing the cause or his symptoms. Ulrich would take a detour to Germany to receive medical treatment, while his bandmates headed to the UK. This wasn't the first time Metallica dealt with illnesses or injuries that jeopardized their live gigs. 4 years prior, in 2000, frontman James Hetfield would suffer a slipped disc, and the band would have a revolving lineup of singers including Kid Rock and Korn's Jonathan Davis. Then 8 years prior, Hetfield would suffer serious burns to his arms during the group's co-headlining tour with Guns N' Roses, resulting in John Marshall of Metal Church playing rhythm guitar for a handful of gigs, while Hetfield was limited to vocal duties. Download Festival organizer Andy Copping would recall Metallica's infamous gig in 2004, writing on Instagram, "Download 2004, the year where there was a no-show for Metallica's Lars Ulrich. I remember receiving a call telling me to go backstage where I was given the news. There were two choices. A, do Metallica cancel, or B, do Metallica convince other drummers on site to fill in? I suggested they cancel because I couldn't see B happening, particularly as quite a few drummers that were asked said no." Louder Sound would publish a piece by writer Alexander Milas, who was in attendance at the festival that year, and recalled that after word spread of Lars being a no-show, rumors soon started to spread amongst those in the audience about what was going to happen. He would write, "I heard Lars Ulrich jumped out of a helicopter as it was landing and disappeared into the crowd. One allegedly in the No Label executive tells me with all the severity of a news anchor between JD and Coke burps." Other theories that were circulating at the time ranged from death to, even worse, Lars' departure from the band, he'd write. Metallica weren't going to let their fans down, and as part of their 2004 European tour, Slipknot was their opening act, and Slipknot that night was scheduled to play ahead of Metallica's headlining spot at the festival. To salvage the show, the band spent several hours rehearsing with several different drummers from the bands who were on the bill that night, including Slipknot, Slayer, and even Lars' own drum tech. The idea that night was for several drummers to help Metallica make it through their live set, and the band would show up an hour late to their gig with frontman James Hetfield informing the crowd of what was happening that night. It would be Slayer's Dave Lombardo who would perform Battery and the Four Horsemen, while Joey Jordison of Slipknot would perform a majority of the songs in the set, including playing Creeping Death, Seek and Destroy, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and the last 5 songs of the set. Jordison, while wearing his Slipknot mask, would play 8 of the 11 songs Metallica performed that night, and Ulrich's drum tech, Flemming Larsen, would sit in with the band performing Fade to Black. Jordison would be hailed as the hero of the day, no pun intended, but Dave Lombardo of Slayer would also play an important part in the events that day. Lombardo's time with Metallica went back over nearly 2 decades, recalling to Louder Sound when he first heard the band saying, "I remember a live demo tape being passed around and we'd listen to that. We were blown away." Slayer got to play with Metallica really early on at a club called the Woodstock in Orange County on October 22, 1982. I remember standing between James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine, watching them. That was an amazing experience. Lombardo would recall in the same interview being asked to perform that night in 2004, saying, "Slayer had played in the tent earlier in the evening, and I was somewhere backstage when I was approached by management. They said Lars can't make it, and Metallica was wondering if he'd be able to sit in. It was a bit of a shock. My first thought was, is Lars okay? But they said, he's okay, he's at the doctor's, he's just having a bit of a moment. So I said I'd do whatever I could to help." Lombardo would end up going into a rehearsal room with the members of Metallica and would admit he only knew a handful of songs well enough to play them, and that he didn't know the finer details of some of their other tracks. It was decided that Lombardo would perform Battery and the Four Horsemen, and he would admit that only performing 2 songs took the pressure off of him, as he praised Jordison's performance, saying the drummer was better suited to fill in on more songs since he played as part of a Metallica cover band earlier in his career. Lombardo would look back at the show telling Louder Sound, "They were headlining, so the energy there was just intense. I definitely had to retain my composure and think, this is going to be great, stay positive, let's rock." After it was all done, we took a bow at the very end. They were really grateful. They appreciated the help. For them to even ask me, it was an honor. I'm very proud to have helped them out when they needed it, and it just became a small part of their history. Come on, I got to play with Metallica, he'd say. So what was the deal with Lars? Well, he would later issue a statement almost a year after the incident telling Metal Hammer about how he was going through some pretty difficult times in his life, stating, "We'd had a heavy touring schedule in Japan, Europe, America, and Australia. In the midst of that, there were things that came unraveled in my personal life, my family and my marriage and stuff. I'd had a lot of late nights and early mornings, so I woke up in Copenhagen on the Sunday morning, had brunch with 14 in-laws and cousins, and then I got on the plane. It was pretty scary being in the little metal tube at 41,000 feet. I never had anxiety attacks or any kind of stress attacks ever, so we landed in Hamburg and went to the hospital. They took some blood tests and everything was normal physically. It was just everything caught up with me mentally. It was the first ever Metallica gig I'd ever missed. You want to try laying in a hospital in Germany while Dave Lombardo, the greatest drummer on the planet, is playing with your band? That's not easy. Joey Jordison too. I have a bit of an odd relationship with it. I still haven't looked at the press or the pictures," he'd say. Loudersound would report that Slayer's Tom Araya would be quoted as saying at the time, "We were like, oh well, we just lost another drummer. Dave has a tendency to play fast, period. But Metallica played faster. They sounded a lot more like what Metallica should sound like," he'd say. Sadly, in July of 2021, Jordison would pass away in his sleep at the age of 46, and following his death, tributes would pour in, including Metallica frontman James Hetfield, who posted a photo of the drummer performing with the band at the Download Festival in 2004 with a caption that read, "Rest in peace, brother." That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. We'll see you again, rock and roll through stories. Take care.